The Athletic.
Rowland roller coaster as rivals rise and fall in racing roulette. Pascal peaks in petulant peloton palaver. Muller magic as app comes good. And springtime for Da Costa as catalogue makes Porsche pay. Hello and welcome to the Formula E podcast from the race. We'll be looking back at the Misano EPrix, and joining me today, as always, of course, is our intrepid correspondent, Sam Smith. But we also have a very special guest, the winner of the recent Tokyo EPrix from Maserati MSG Racing, Max Guenther. Max, hello, welcome to the show.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
So, coming on the back of, I think, what we might describe as one of the crazier weekends in not just Formula E history, but possibly even motorsport history. Race 1. I didn't think at one point that we were going to get to the end of that with anyone with a front wing on. Just what was it like being part of, well, racing roulette?
Yeah, I think you explained it already pretty well. Racing roulette is a good way to speak about it. I think, obviously a very strategic race. You've seen it. The slipstream effect with our Gen 3 cars is very big. And on top of that, the amount of energy saving on a permanent racetrack like in Misano has been pretty high. At the end, it's the number of laps that Formula E defines for us that then gives you this ratio of how much energy saving it is. In this race, it was really a lot. You've seen it. We had to save our energy for quite some time to make our we call it target on the dash rise more and more, until this point where you think you can, maintain your position at the end of the race without getting overtaken. And this is a bit a similar game everybody was playing. And obviously track position becomes more and more important the more you move on into the race and into the later stage of the race. So it is, as you can imagine, very, very hectic, such a race. You need to keep your car clean. You mentioned about the front wing. It is very fragile. So, there are a lot of things to consider. And, at the end, to finish P3 was obviously a great outcome for us.
With all that energy saving you mentioned, some of the speed differentials with people almost sort of started lifting and coasting halfway down the straight, it was quite frightening. It must have been, how can you prepare for that? Because the normal braking points for corners was out the window. Yeah,
you try to come up with a game plan, obviously, before the race, knowing that you have to adapt and change it a lot throughout the race because, there is no chance you can prepare exactly for a race like this one. But obviously we've raced in Portland, we've raced in Sao Paulo with similar style of races. I think this one was, very much extreme and that's how we had to adapt to it. I think, it's good to have this variation, of racing in Formula E, that some races, they are more about track position with less energy saving. Some tracks with a, let's say, normal ratio, as we know it from a Gen 2 race. And then these extreme ones. Obviously, these extreme ones, I think they are dangerous. And this is something on my personal side that I would love to maybe change in the future, because it is very, very, very extreme.
What would you do? Would you just have made the races, because the Sunday race was better, right? Would you just make them a bit shorter so the energy saving isn't quite as extreme, or is there something else that could be done?
Correct. I think at the end, if you take the Sunday's race as an example, as you mentioned, it was a bit better, but still, if you would make this race 1 or 2 laps shorter, then we would see, I think, much more normal racing, still plenty of overtakes, but in a more ordered way. And from a driver's point of view, or from my point of view, I think it would be a good solution.
We heard a few drivers, Mitch Evans in particular, being quite critical of the behaviour of some of the others. Do you feel like that, or was this just a product of how it was always going to be and it was very difficult to do anything other than the way it was?
Well, I think, obviously after such a race where adrenaline is high, I guess everybody's dealing with his emotions in a different way. I'm more the guy who is calm and keeps it for myself, because anyway, the race is what it is. Everybody's trying to drive the best possible race for himself. I had a word with Mitch as well after the race. We get along well, and it's all good from this side.
Sam, what did you make of it? We, like as Max said, we've seen similar sort of races in Portland, but was the design of the track in Misano going to make this an inevitability?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it was always going to be this way. It was probably just a little bit more extreme than Portland was last June, and that's just a legacy of the way the track was. There was more overtaking areas, particularly into that really difficult sort of chicane area. And then I actually watched out there in free practice, and there was scope for lots of lifting and coasting and managing the energy pretty much all around the circuit, and I think it was quite a good mix. The thing for me is the Gen 3 cars on permanent tracks look really quick. That's the first thing, which is pleasing to the eye.
They do in qualifying, and when they're going for it, they look horribly slow when everyone's just going around saving energy.
Yeah, that's the slight juxtaposition, isn't it? That during the race, when people are lifting and coasting, and you get this 3/4 of the race, which is brewing up to then unleash in the last quarter. It's just jockeying for position, and as Max said, the danger then when you get this concertina accordion effect into some of these corners, notably that T8, T9 chicane, it becomes a problem, and people, it's so easy to catch front wings, and as we saw, there was at least 5 or 6 drivers that had to either pit or just be walking wounded to the end of the race. I think, look, ultimately, 1 or 2 of these events a season is fine. I know the drivers generally don't like it, but look, it's the same for everybody. Everybody's got to deal with it, and some deal with it better than others, and a lot depends on where you are in the pack. But interestingly, we'll go on to mention the ERT drivers later on. They were right at the back pretty much, or lower midfield for most of that race. And they were really cute because in the first few laps, the first sort of 10 laps, they were just drafting each other and backing off and just about on the snake, and then managing their energy and getting to a level where they had some really good energy figures. They came through, and Dan Ticktum got a best ever result in 4th place. So, like Max said, it's how your game plan evolves during the race. But I think again, just looking at the outside, people looking into it, I think a lot of what I see and hear is that a lot of the fans do like it. It's kind of NASCAR drafting for single seaters, isn't it? Which we've never really seen before. And I think ultimately, if it's a few times a season, it's fine. We are going to see it again probably in Berlin and Portland and potentially Shanghai this season. So there's probably going to be more than those 1 or 2 races I mentioned. But you've got to think about the bigger picture of attracting new fans to a new strand of the sport. And I think a lot of the drivers don't necessarily see that. And I actually mentioned to Jeff Dodds, the CEO of Formula E, last weekend, I said, look, why don't you go to a driver's briefing with Marek Naravecki from the FIA and just talk to the drivers and say, look, this is a part and parcel of the long-term future of Formula E. On one level, it evidences how you use the energy and the efficiency of the powertrains, but 2, it's entertainment. It's you've got to entertain, you've got to put a show on, and if it's like this, occasionally, you're just going to have to deal with it and do the best of it. I think there's a lot of there's a purist element in the drivers, which I completely understand, and I'm probably that way inclined as well, honestly.
Yeah, well, that's what they're paid to do, right? They're not there to be entertaining.
Well, true. It's something where I think if you get a good mix of it, it actually is okay. And as we saw on Sunday, when it's not as extreme as it was the day before, you tend to get cleaner races, and you tend to get more exciting finish as well, certainly for 3rd place there. So, Yeah, I mean, it's a fine balance that the rules makers and the promoters have to get to, and we've talked about it a lot before. They don't always get it right. You know, it's only 2 months ago we were talking about how boring Mexico and Riyadh was, right?
Exactly.
So you've got to try and find somewhere in the middle. And Sunday's race was, it wasn't far off.
Yeah. So Max, Sam mentioned how quick the Gentry cars can be now. Because Misano's really a motorbike track, but in qualifying, when you had the power turns right up, what was it like to drive? Was it a good driver's circuit?
Certainly. I think for me, when I get this question, every racetrack is cool in its way, and it has got the own challenges of how you can, get this fine line with your car around the circuit. And as well in Misano, I really enjoyed it. In qualifying, it was a great challenge to feel, the speed of the car, as Sam is mentioning, especially in the straight line. We are very much a lot faster compared to the Gen 2, for instance. And this track really shows this evolution of Formula E. And I'd like maybe just to come back briefly on what Sam was mentioning. I think it's absolutely right that it's a good thing that we have to adapt to these different kind of races, that there are, challenges like the big energy saving. I think it's about the balance. We want to see great sport, and this is what we're here for. The show is very important, and we want to make to give a great show as well to the fans. So I'm fully in line with that, and I just think it's about the balance, about the right ratio, and to as well consider other elements like safety and fair racing.
With that in mind, like we said, the second race, which is slightly shorter, redressed the balance a little bit. But knowing that, how did you prepare yourself? Were you thinking it was going to be a different race, or when you were on the grid, was it like, here we go again, I'm going to have to be checking out when people are going to start lifting and coasting and taking slightly weird, wide alternative lines through the race here?
Definitely we knew that the race on Sunday is going to be a bit different in terms of the character. It will be a bit more about, positioning yourself early enough in the front. And I think that's the beauty of our sport, that strategy and this game plan that as well, same mentioned earlier, is so important and is so crucial. It's really important to have this good communication with your team as well during the race. And this is why ultimately I think our races in Formula E are the most exciting from any motorsport. There
was still some really great battling in that race, and you and Jake Hughes had a little bit of a ding dong. That must have been fun. Yeah, look, it's always good to have these kind of overtakings in a race, late in the race. That's what the people want to see. I think in our particular race, we had quite some difficulties to face. I think I did 2/3 of the race without radio and without beep and bops. So I was really completely freestyling my race. Then once we got the radio back working, there were some other issues. The team didn't have the right, or not the same energy that I had in the car. So it was quite a difficult race to manage from our side. That's why for us the last stage of the race has been not as planned.
Max, on your radio, were you hooked up to the local airport as well? Because I know you got your pilot's license over those banana curbs a couple of times. You got some good air there, didn't you?
Yeah. Look. I think for my second career as a pilot, it was a positive weekend because ITA Airways, Aero Italia, a lot of airlines have reached out to me after this weekend, and that's why on Sunday it was tough to get the right channel between my race team and the airport.
Sam, there were a few track limit violation penalties on Sunday. This was something that you said to me, as soon as you got to the track on Thursday. Was there anything that could have been done to sort of limit that, or was that again a bit of an inevitability of the track design?
It was inevitable that was going to be the case. You could see it straight away. I mean, I spoke to Lucas Di Grassi at length as soon as I arrived at the track on Thursday. And as I was chatting to him on the pit wall, Scott Elkins came up and interjected and scooped up Lucas and took him in the safety car to have a look at what they were doing in terms of putting these banana curbs. We call them sausage curbs, but let's not split hairs on that. They were bright yellow, so everyone was calling them banana curbs. Yeah, so I think they actually did a reasonable job. It's always a difficult one what you do, and obviously the primary thing is that it's done in a safe way. But something had to be done, otherwise the creative lines on the entry and the exit would have just looked ridiculous, really. They'd have been driving most of the lap off the track, really. I think ultimately it played out reasonably well. There were dozens of violations, of course, but the vast majority of those were in free practice and qualifying when the drivers were just getting their eye in. I think there was a few, wasn't there, in qualifying where people lost their times. Nick Cassidy certainly missed out in going through during his lap on Sunday. But yeah, overall it worked well. I mean, they had a potential of having tyre walls on exit and stuff like this, but the speeds they were doing on some of those corners, particularly those last two corners of the track, the last thing you want is a tyre wall anywhere near the apex of the corner for a safety point of view. So I thought Scott Elkins and the FIA actually did a reasonable job in a very difficult circumstance with these cars, which aren't designed for going to permanent tracks, and on a track, by the way, that is really designed for two-wheel motorsport rather than four. I thought it was a decent solution, and thank God we weren't really talking about track limits, because nobody wants to go into that whole boring debate about track limits again, do we? It's been exhausted to death, really.
Max, did you think it was ultimately the right sort of solution that was taken there?
I think yes, actually. I think the FIA and Formula E did a very good job here, because I think the track limit topic is something that the fans and as well ourselves, we are not too excited about. Obviously, you need to define rules. I think that's very important. But I think at the end, it was well done. And at the end, it's then the similar topic like the amount of energy saving that we speak earlier, to then race on a fast track like this one with track limits. At the end, it's the same for everybody. And what you need to do in the car as a competitor is to make the best possible job and adapt to exactly these conditions.
Obviously, you got a penalty in that second race that took you out of the points. Did that take a little bit of a shine off the weekend as a whole? Because, like say, podium in the first race, it was shaping up to be a solid weekend for you.
I think absolutely we can be satisfied with the weekend. I think always when you come home from a weekend with a trophy and a third place finish, that's a positive weekend. And I think our racecraft has been very competitive again this weekend. For sure, yesterday there was a good points finish on the table. I mentioned to you earlier about some difficulties maybe that we were facing in the race, and then we had this last lap incident, which was very surprising. But I think that's racing. Racing sometimes things like this, you don't want them to happen, but they can happen. It's a shame. It's the first time this year we didn't finish in the points, but still all in all, I think really good feeling in the car, good momentum, and I think we're in good shape, and already the motivation is very, very high for the coming races.
26 points off the joint championship leaders, but we've seen enormous fluctuations. Do you think that you're in with a chance of the title fight this year?
I think, going into the season, for sure, the favorites are the Porsche cars and the Jaguar cars. And our goal was, to close this gap and to challenge them and to give them a good fight. And I think so far with these 7 races we've been driving now, we can be happy. We showed great pace over one lap, and as well being competitive in the race. I think, to answer your question, yes, I think there are probably. I think we are in a competitive position, but at the same time, there are 6 or 8 other drivers who can do exactly the same to fight for this championship this year. So it is something that is not, in my mind going into the coming races, because what I want is to perform on the highest level possible from weekend to weekend, and to score many points. And this will be the best possible way to be in a good position at the end of the year.
So you might about to get something a bit unusual here. I think Sam might owe you and your team a bit of a public apology. So Sam, Max is here now. He's won a race. He's on the fringe of the title fight. You classified them as no hopers going into on our season preview. So what have you got to say for yourself?
Well, guilty as charged, and I have actually spoken to Max a little bit, and to Cyril Blay, who is his engineer, Max's engineer, and also leads the engineering team for Maserati MSG. We did indeed, and I think just going back to it, the basis of that really was the fact that there'd been a certain amount of destabilisation in the team and changes in the team and adapting different staff. And the way I rationalised it was that if you do that in any sport, it's very difficult to immediately come back and fight for more success. I think in Formula E, the margins are so fine. I just thought, well, this recalibration is going to take some months and some races, and it won't be to the end of the season until Max and Maserati MSG come good. And I was so wrong, and I'm very happy to say that I was wrong, because it's great to see those guys doing such a fantastic job at the front of the field. And I am pleasantly surprised, and all power to them for doing it, because it hasn't been easy. But I remember speaking to Max before the start of the season, and he was very confident. He always is, because racing drivers are that way inclined, but Max is super assured of himself. And I think really I sort of still had a doubt in my mind, and then Max just scoring points in every single race. In fact, his non-score because of the penalty on Sunday afternoon in Misano means that he was the last driver to score points in every race this season, and now there is none of the 22 drivers that have got 100% point strike rate. So I think from the first half of the season, which is almost complete now, you look at what Max and Cyril and the whole team have achieved, and it's one of the stories of the season, and it's a surprising story. And as I'll repeat it again, I'm more than happy to say sorry, and great to see those guys and girls doing such a fantastic job in Formula E this season.
Max, I suggest you milk this for all it's worth while you can.
Well, Sam, first of all, thanks for your feedback. Really appreciate. And yeah, I can fully understand your opinion going into the season, because not only from outside but as well from inside, it was not, as you can imagine, an easy situation. There have been a few bigger changes to the lead of the team, and yeah, I think the response we had already from testing in Valencia and then going into the season has been very strong. And we've been working extremely hard in the off season, but as well in the first couple of races to maximize our performance, to make our package stronger than last year, to make it more complete, to work on weaknesses that we had in the package. So really, I think the season we are showing so far is the output of hard work on all sides, and that's something that makes me feel proud about this whole project. And as I said earlier, I'm feeling good, in the car with what we're doing, the approach we take, and with this base, I'm already very, very much looking forward to the second half of the year.
Well, the second half concludes what I might say is a little bit of a greedy triple header of home races for you and the team. So we've had Maserati's home race in Misano. We're about to have MSG's home race in Monaco, and then your home race in Berlin. So 3 home races in a row. That is quite the run, but obviously Monaco, one of the most famous racing tracks in the world. A little bit of extra motivation to do well in that one, I would imagine.
Definitely, I can underline that. And I think for me personally, the weekend coming up now in Monaco is the most special weekend of the year, always, because of a few reasons. I think one reason, okay, it's our home race. It's a home race of MSG. At the same time, it's my home race because I'm living in Monaco since 4 years. And then there is another reason. It's because it's Monaco. There is so much history, prestige, flair about this place. I remember watching all my heroes as a growing karting driver or single-seater driver racing on the streets of Monaco, and it has always been a dream for me to compete on this track, and now to be in this position and to try and get on this podium with Prince Albert is something very, very special. As you can imagine, I love this race every year, and I look forward to next week.
And Formula E has categorically shown that you can race and have fantastic races in Monaco. Is there a slightly different approach to this one? Because even though overtaking is possible, it's not exactly easy here, is it?
Yes, you're right. I think, honestly speaking, I think Monaco is the perfect track for Formula E. You know, it's a very nice ratio of importance of qualifying, but at the same time, the race is not over because you start in the front. Overtaking is still very much possible. I think we all know the overtaking starts from our races in Monaco versus the ones of Formula One, for instance. Yeah. So I think the show is brilliant that we deliver on this track, and it suits very well to our car.
Well, brilliant. We wish you all the very best of luck for that. Sam, you'll be continuing your tour of lovely coastal racetracks. So anything to add before we let Max go?
I don't think so, not really, no. I think that Max is right. The Monaco EPrix has proved to be one of the best events because we know that we're going to see some action there, and we get this, we get a proper structure to the race. So qualifying is really important there, but you can make moves. We saw Nick Cassidy, didn't we, making 6-7 places and getting the victory there last season. So it is entirely possible, and Max has always gone really well at Monaco. He's got some results there in the past, and he's been racing pretty much always at the front there. So it'd be a great story, wouldn't it? Monegasque team winning in Monaco. I mean, they've had some. I think they've had a couple of podiums before. I certainly remember Felipe Massa, actually one of the rare races that he actually turned up and got a result, which was Monaco. So.
Well, he knew the track.
He knew the track very well. Yeah, I think it's great. The one thing I'd like to see is maybe the FIA mix it up a bit with the attack mode, which is on the sort of outer edge of Casino Square, and it's always been there. But I wonder if they could get another position. I'm trying to think. Imagine the lunacy of having it at the hairpin.
Well, I was thinking that.
That would be really nuts. But no, I maybe they could look at somewhere else. But I think it's going to be a great weekend, the midpoint of the championship, and I think from that point on we're going to get a nice understanding of really who's in the title hunt. And as you said earlier, both of you, there is no reason why Max and Maserati MSG can't at least be in the mix heading into the second part of the season. So it's going to be intriguing.
Well, on that note of unbridled optimism from Sam, we will let you go. Thanks very much for your time, Max, and all the best of luck for the second half of the season.
Thanks so much. It was great talking to you guys.
Yeah, great to have Max join us on the show there. We've alluded to a fair bit of what happened over those two races, but in reality, we've just skimmed the surface. So let's start a deep dive going back onto something that started with you and I watching trackside in Tokyo and manifested itself in FP2 at Misano, and that is what I deemed, I think at the time, as silly buggers, and that's the behaviour of some of the drivers massively slowing down ahead of their laps in practice, and inevitably it's caused a crash. So off you go.
Well, we said it, didn't we, in Tokyo? There were several near misses in free practice one, and And sure enough, free practice 2 in Misano, Nick Cassidy goes straight into the wall after an incident which, when you watch from his onboard, is absolutely terrifying. So just to explain what happens is the drivers go out, you get this yin and yang of the drivers coming towards the end of the lap and wanting a clear run at the exit of the corner and getting onto a flying lap and positioning their car so they've got a nice gap to the next car and so forth. And on this occasion, there was a really quick left, almost a kink really, before you went into another sort of medium speed left to get onto the pit straight. Nick Cassidy came upon first Antonio Felix da Costa, who was very gentlemanly and moved offline. But then ahead of him, there was Dan Ticktum and Sam Bird. And how it was explained to me by Sam was that Ticktum was on his left and he had to move onto the right and was on the line. And the speed differentiation between he and Nick Cassidy, I don't even want to think what it was. It was probably around about 80, 90 miles an hour at a conservative estimate. And Nick had nowhere to go, was forced to go on the grass. And obviously once on the grass, effectively has no steering and hit the wall on the right, went straight into the fence. And this was visceral. I was actually at that exact point where he first hit the glancing blow. And it was, you just saw him disappear. And I thought, this is going to be a really big shunt. Thankfully, the gravel slowed him down and he had a relatively minor bang into the wall. And I immediately went over to Nick and just got out the cockpit and asked him about it. And he was raging about it. And yeah, thankfully the team got the car together and they got out. But going back to the incident, and I know we share the same opinion on this, just a needless incident. And one day, that won't be a near miss. It will be a glancing blow, tyre to tyre, and we'll have a plane crash. And it's a serious safety issue. And I was absolutely amazed that no action was taken against Sam Bird. Now, I'm not saying it was Sam Bird's fault. He was manoeuvring his car away from Ticktum's. It was really the fault of the team not communicating effectively to Sam where he should be on the track. Dawdling around on the racing line on effectively a blind quick corner is just ridiculous.
Why are they doing it, right? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but tyre prep on those tyres is basically not that important. So they're just like fighting over a little bit of track space or whatever. That can be done by GPS, right? You don't need to be going quite so slowly. It's senseless. I don't get it.
Well, they've got all the tools. You're right. They've got GPS. They know where cars are on the track. We know where cars are on the track on the bloody Formula E website because it shows you that.
I just stand in bloody trackside. It's not hard. They're short tracks.
It infuriates me. And well, look. First of all, tyre prep is important. Everything's important in Formula E. You've got to get the exact.
Oh, I'm not having it that they have to put heat cycles through those things. You could run them for 4 races if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean they've got to prep properly, right? It's so tight between everybody. But this is a free practice session. And I actually put a request in to speak to Scott Elkins. Now, obviously, Scott doesn't make the decisions. He refers it to the stewards, and the stewards then make a decision on the penalty. I think there was a reprimand. There was no formal action in terms of a fine or a grid penalty or what have you. And this is a fundamental safety issue at high speed with a real closing delta speed. It's just. There must be a solution to this. There must be. Do they do a minimum time?
Minimum speed.
Yeah, minimum speed during the lap.
They could have 110% or whatever that they have to do.
Yeah. But they're
barely moving. At some points, it's ridiculous.
My request to Scott Elkins was I was essentially not allowed to speak to Scott on it, which to me, when that happens, suggests that they are sensitive to it, but. It has to be looked at. That was really close to being a wheel-on-wheel contact, and Cassidy could have been upside down very quickly, and then you're in the lap of the gods as to where the car goes and what it does. And that will happen one day, no doubt about it. 3 weeks ago, you and I looked at each other at that last corner at Tokyo, which was much slower speed than Misano, and we just said to each other, there's going to be a shunt in a minute. It's inevitable. And it didn't happen on that occasion. 2 weeks later...
Only by good fortune.
Yeah, 2 weeks later, it does. And it's cheap, and it's just... ironically, it's not cheap for Jaguar because they probably cost them 50 grand, but it's a cheap way of screwing people over. They don't go out to screw people over. No driver does that. Sam Bird did not do that deliberately. He just wasn't given the correct communication by his team. So
I'm sure Sam didn't, but I'm not having it that no one does it.
Well, I mean, that's a different argument. But it's just so senseless. It just doesn't make any sense. And it just infuriates some drivers. And, Nick was rightly very, very pissed off about it.
Right, so in complete contrast to no action being taken upon this, let's try and dissect what the hell happened to Antonio Felix da Costa in race 1. Right, inspired by you and your sniffing, he'd been the main talking point ahead of the race with whatever was going on between him and the Porsche team.
Yes.
Has a really underwhelming qualifying, which was sort of in keeping with some of the issues that were being had, and then produces this barnstorming drive with chaos all around him to win. I've gone out and I wake up the next morning and he's been disqualified. It's like, what the hell? And then I read your story and it's like, come on, that's not really a thing, is it? Explain.
It is a thing. It's a thing that involves a catalogue and a very insignificant component called a throttle damper spring. And Antonio Felix da Costa lost his win, a fantastic narrative arc of what you mentioned about the last few weeks and the uncertainty over his future relationship with his present team, Taikoya Porsche. Post-race scrutineering, they took the throttle damper spring that was in his car, and it was found to not be in compliance with the Gen 3 Spark catalogue. Now, what the crux of the matter with this goes back to the Gen 2, Gen 3 crossover. Because Spark didn't have the part ready enough, which was one of many, many things with the sort of disastrous birth of Gen 3, sort of 18 months ago, the Gen 2 damper, the throttle spring damper, was being used in the development testing of the car. Now, this is a sealed part. It was taken in technical checks. It had been checked as well at Diriyah for the top 3. And remember, the top 3 are the only cars that are checked in post-race scrutineering. And the parts list, the sealed part is not listed in the catalogue. And as far as I understand it, the team manager of Porsche explained that normally the changes of the that are within the catalogue are highlighted. So when you get a new set of regulations, some stuff is redacted or struck out or highlighted. Yeah. This original part wasn't. So essentially what it meant was that Porsche were not racing a compliant part of the car.
And I guess had been all season.
That's the assumption. That is the assumption. And potentially for the whole of last season as well, is what I understand. Now, Pascal Wehrlein's car was also had this, but obviously was outside the top 3 and wasn't in the formal technical checks. But I found out that his was informally
not a part they check every
well.
time then? So
no, it's not. It's a random check.
Oh, okay.
It is.
Yeah.
It is a random check. So look, in terms of attributing blame for this, if that's what you're going to do, ultimately, it comes down to a mix of Spark, because they hadn't done the admin properly on their catalogue, which you get various iterations of during a season. So Porsche weren't to know that this was now not in the parts catalogue. And the suspicion is that several other teams have been using this as well, although it can't be proved because it's not been scrutineered after races. So then you think, well, it's going to be passed to the stewards. It's a minor part. It's an administrative error, which isn't solely Porsche's fault, although Porsche, it was an oversight on Porsche's part.
I mean, look, it's upon them to stick to the rules, right? But why is that a disqualification and not a fine? Right? I'm assuming there is no performance gain from the different type of spring that's being used now, right?
Well, you not only assume, it was absolutely explicit in the bulletin issued by the FIA and signed by the stewards, which said there was no performance advantage of this different spring. Florian Modlinger, the program director for Formula E at Porsche, on the Sunday morning, I got in extra early knowing that there was a lot of work to do on this, and he showed me the 2 springs. they are almost identical, apart from the fact that one is coated, and there is a price difference between them. You can check that in the catalogue.
I was going to guess
Andrew.
that bit.
Yeah, flick through the 140-page catalogue this afternoon when you've got nothing better to do and check it out. I mean,
get
for God's sake.
some throttle dampering springs. You never know when you might need one.
Well, look,
Never
rules
gonna
are black.
use them.
Rules are black and white. Rules are black and white. Ultimately, the stewards have, they have, through the International Sporting Code, they have the penalties at their disposal. This was deemed, even though there was no performance advantage, this was deemed as a slam dunk non-compliant part, which ultimately, I'm not defending, I'm not going to defend the stewards, but they only had one decision to make. It's black and white. There's no areas of grey. So this is the other question, isn't it? And this is not just Formula E. This is all of motorsport.
Is the laws and ass thing, isn't it?
Well, should some common sense not dictate that the team is heavily fined? Potentially, Spark should be sanctioned for not getting the thing, admin correct as well, and Da Costa keeps his win. And the team are fine because
this drives me up the wall. This I remember back in season 2 where Degrassi won in Mexico, and then about 17 hours later was disqualified because there was some non-compliant part of the seatbelts. It's like all the fans who were there need to know when they leave who was the winner. Fine them heavily, fine them ridiculously heavily, so you don't do it again, and leave it be. Honestly, it is
for the fans and the viewers. It's just very disappointing. It's not a good look for anybody, I think, at all.
It's such petty bloody bureaucracy. Oh, these are the rules. Change the rules.
Well, here's the thing which I found very very interesting, and I remember this because I was there. Santiago season 4. And I think potentially you were there as well.
I was. Was that when it was so hot we actually melted and they decided in order to save on plastic they wouldn't have any water?
Probably was. And the track started to resemble cottage cheese, didn't it, at one stage as well? It all started melting.
Yeah, I was there. I was definitely there. Yeah.
DS Techeetah, as then it was, Techeetah got a 1-2. Lotterer, Vergne and Lotterer. And both of those... Both of those cars had been essentially doctored with what I was told was a sort of ersatz quick release on the driver's seatbelts.
Oh, yes.
Remember this?
I've got the wrong Santiago. Yeah, that was the first.
That was in the city centre race. Yeah.
Yes.
Now it was proven that they had basically adapted the safety harness on the car.
I remember, they had the quick release. Yeah. They were like cable ties, basically.
It was quite cute, but it was completely in contravention of about 8 different articles of the technical regulations, sporting regulations, and international sporting codes, or whatever. I think there was four strikes on different rules. They were fined €15,000, but they were allowed to keep their win.
Yeah.
Now, how do you... the discrepancy between that, a slam dunk safety issue, and then something which is essentially an admin error and doesn't have any performance-related element to it for Da Costa's penalty last Saturday at Misano, it's just a stark difference, isn't it? I mean, it's just there is just no consistency, and it's not just Formula E, as I said. There's lots of other championships that have this, which is a bit infuriating. But Antonio Felix da Costa had the sympathy of the entire paddock. I watched him on Sunday when he was right at the back of the grid, and I think there was at least a dozen people from different teams that came up to him and said, "I'm sure, we really hope that you have a great race here this afternoon." There was a lot of really good feeling towards Antonio, who, by the way, conducted himself with absolute class, as you would imagine somebody of Da Costa's standing would, and he did. The bigger picture for me is the relationship between Porsche and the FIA over this. There's been several flashpoints in the past. London last year with something that went all the way to the International Sporting Court with the Da Costa deflating Hancock, remember that? And then there was
again, I couldn't get my head around that one either.
No, and then there was the Mexico launch control controversy, which was never proven and was thrown out. And then this, a lot of the team, I think, within Porsche, although they wouldn't go on record saying it explicitly, they do believe that some are out to get them. And actually, not only that, but Florian Modlinger was on TV essentially saying that, and actually I can quote it here. He said, "We have a bit of a feeling that not all teams are treated equally. That's our personal impression, and with the FIA, a World Championship, this must be guaranteed for the future that all teams are treated equally." Without getting into a conspiratorial element here,
that's pretty flat out, that is.
That's as flat out as you'll get Florian Modlinger and Porsche going public with something like that. And they said that to Formula E TV. You know, he wouldn't say anything like that on record to me, but they did it to the masses on TV. And I find that really interesting because there is an element of a feeling of persecution of Porsche from obviously within Porsche. The other manufacturers will probably say it's baloney, but there is that, and you just wonder how that might influence things going forward. Now, forward wind a little bit, I'll keep this really quick. On the Sunday, I was on the grid, just mooching around and chatting to people ahead of Sunday's race. I heard some raised voices, and I turned to my left, and I won't name who they are, but there was one senior Porsche person and one senior FIA person having the mother and father of all rows on the grid in full view of everybody. There was gesticulations, there was pointing, and there was shouting, and I've never seen that on a grid before in Formula E. It was full on. Right. It was full on in public, and
normally these things are done, behind closed doors.
This wasn't. This was full on, and there is bad blood at the moment between Porsche and the FIA. And I actually got to speak to Jeff Dodds about this a little bit on Sunday as well. And
you're Jeff's new go-to man, aren't you? This is you've dropped his name about 5 times now.
Well, the great thing about Jeff is, compared to some of the other senior figures in Formula E, is that they stand up and make themselves available, and we celebrate that. That's fantastic to see. And
I think you're talking about previous incumbents rather than current ones, right?
Yeah, that's what. Did I say current? Yeah, I meant previous. Previous, but Jeff's fantastic. We'll speak to you at any given moment, and he said he felt physically ill for Da Costa after that. He was absolutely devastated for him. And ultimately, nobody comes out of this very well, especially Formula E, because ultimately people don't care about the detail as much,
no one ever reads the, some people do, but the small print on this, it's disappointing for all those who tuned in. Of course, what it did mean, though, is that Oliver Rowland won a race and Nissan are back on top. How long has it been? 4 years?
Almost 4 years, yeah. Berlin, August 2020 was the last time they won with Ollie first time round in the team. So he was shuffled up to the win. You never want to take a win like that, and Nissan were very low key on it. But at the end of the day, Oliver only got 25 points, and all of a sudden found himself at the head of
the championship one.
Head of the championship, yeah. And then forward wind 24 hours, and he's about to slap another 25 points on top of that. So, I mean, the bigger picture with Ollie is, and I don't want to say we told you so I'm actually redressing the balance of the Maserati MSG thing earlier. But in the season preview, VDB, I think you will find that probably both of us talked up Oliver Rowland quite a bit. And
we were very optimistic about that move. It just seemed like such a good fit again.
Yeah, he is a genuine title challenger. And I tell you what, it's not just us saying that. There was other whispers and other chats with drivers informally last weekend that I had, and they said, watch out for Rowland because that thing is quick. They found a lot over last season, and now and they've slotted in a driver who is getting the best out of it. And look, the facts speak for itself. At the moment, he's smashing Sasha Fenestraz up, and we were talking glowingly about Fenestraz last season. So
exactly,
Rowland and
other things I didn't understand from the weekend. What happened to him in race 2?
Well, he was doomed from the start. On the grid, they found a problem on the grid itself. They took his seat out and they were shuffling something around. They have like a perimeter of software that ultimately didn't reset properly, so it had to be done manually on the grid, which took a bit of time, and I think went right up to the sort of 5-minute board. So they were flat out doing that, and that had a knock-on process really of the preparations, and ultimately it was something as simple as the lap count not being activated within the software of what they used during the race. So they were running the race 1 lap short all the time. So he was never going to finish that race.
Well, on the TV, right, it was clear that he was 3 or 4% ahead in terms of consumption and arrivals. Do they have the monitors there? Could they not see this?
Well, I asked that question to Oliver Rowland and Tommaso Volpe, and I think the procedures and the way they manage things in the future will be slightly tighter, and I think there'll be more than just a plan A. I think they will have to adapt to that and have to have some fail-safe systems that they can back up these things. And yeah, I mean, it was a bit embarrassing, to be honest. A real, as Tommaso Volpe described it, a really stupid error that the team made, and they lost 25 points.
Because he would have either won or come second. That podium, those top two slots were pretty much guaranteed for him, even if he had to conserve, what was he short, 2% or whatever, he still would have finished second. That's a massive difference,
It's
right?
big points, isn't it? 18 points, and how crucial could that be come London? I don't think Ollie or Nissan want to think about that right now. I think there is a little bit of comfort in the fact that they were, if you'd have asked them before the season after 7 races, that they'd be in this position that they're in at present, which is a very healthy one, with Ollie being third in the championship now and just 9 points behind Pascal Wehrlein and Jake Dennis, who tie at the top. He'd snap your hand off, but equally, he could have been, what would he have been? He would have been probably about 8 points ahead of Wehrlein now.
8 or 9 points. Other shout-outs in Nissan-powered cars. That was an amazing qualifying effort from Jake Hughes in the Sunday.
Yeah.
Especially, it was at the semi-final with that lap. My goodness, he was properly on it.
He was quick all weekend, was Jake. Really hooked up, really flowing. He looked on his onboard and he was just flowing around that circuit. Had that neon McLaren Nissan. Really hooked up. Saturday he got penalised and was sent to the back of the grid for of all things, not having his fire extinguisher activated in his car. I mean,
Was that just a bit of finger trouble?
I think I didn't actually ask the team about that, but I mean, let's hope it didn't involve catalogues or anything, right? I mean, jeez. I mean, it was, I think, disappointing. They've had a few little things, Sambird's steering mechanism failed, didn't it, at Tokyo? So I think Ian James will be tightening things up a little bit heading to Monaco next week on the operation side, which is usually a huge strength of that team. So Jake was quick again, mesmeric qualifying laps that he did. I mean, especially the quarterfinal, which was against Van Dorn. Epic lap he did, just monster lap.
I meant. Yeah, sorry.
And then the final itself, where he beat Jean-Eric Vergne. The race didn't go quite as smoothly. He got sort of shuffled back, had that battle with Max Guenther that Max talked about earlier, and just got shuffled back and was never able to claw it back for himself. Finished, I think, 5th on the road, then got pinged for that skip across the gravel and gaining the advantage, a perceived advantage, and ultimately finished, where did he finish? 8th, I think it was. Bit of a disappointing result, probably would definitely deserve more, but a return to form for Jake, you'd say. Had a bit
and a team as well, because they were absolutely useless in Tokyo, so I think they'll be pleased with that.
Yeah, and Jake's been a bit low key this season, but look, when he's on it, and then we're going to Monaco where he got pole position last season, didn't he, and was really good. So I think this will be a good point of resurgence for Jake and for McLaren.
So I'm conscious we haven't even mentioned the race 2 winner yet, but Pascal Wehrlein became the first double winner of the season, now joint championship leader, sort of among most people's pre-season favourites, if not the out-and-out favourite. Is this now the sort of performance we were expecting to see, and can this be maintained? Because consistency hasn't really been his or that team's strong suit to date.
Well, I think Porsche had the best package last weekend. They were just in a little bit of a different league. Particularly Wehrlein, da Costa and Jake Dennis. And Jake Dennis got 2 runners-up positions. Pascal Wehrlein got shunted out in race 1. I think he hit Vergne, didn't he, and did his wing. And then on Sunday...
He was one of the many thousands of broken front wing.
Yeah. Sunday he was great again, was always in that sort of top 3 or 4, judged it perfectly, trusted the information he was getting from Porsche despite seeing Rowland disappear up the road, and it paid off. And it was a really well-judged victory from Wehrlein. He's the first double race winner in Formula E this season, and the momentum feels with Wehrlein, and I'm just sensing, and I'll wait for a couple of races, but I'm just sensing that this could be a sort of a battle between Wehrlein and Jake Dennis for the title this season. It's brewing up towards that at the minute. I'm not just saying that because they're tied with points at the front of the field, but I just feel that those two, the nemesis of each other, aren't they? They've had so many tasty exchanges, and that'd be a great story if those two go head to head for the title. But it's looking that way.
It will be gloves off, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It will be like that Hagler-Hearns clip you shared with me earlier today.
Yeah.
You have to give that some context.
Proper prize fight. Yeah. We won't go into 1980s boxing too much, but if you do get the chance, have a look at the first round of
I'm up for doing a podcast on that.
Marvellous Marvin Hagler and Thomas the Hitman Hearns in 85. If you watch that on YouTube, if the Dennis and Wehrlein scrap is half as good as that, then we're in for a treat later on this season.
Right, who are we going to talk about next? He says, frantically trying to find his way back. That amazing fight for third in race 2 I honestly thought Muller got over the line ahead of him, and then on the timing screen it popped up that Cassidy was there. I mean, what a fantastic little battle.
Yeah. What a treat, and what a treat it was to have a media centre where you could actually see the track. So as I was typing away and following the timing and driver radios, all I had to do was glance out of the window to the left of me, and I was prepared. So I forget the winner. Wehrlein's won it. Dennis, pretty not easy, but he was secure in second. And then I was just watching Muller, and Muller came out of the last corner. I thought, he's done it. He's got it. Abt Cooper have got a podium. This is extraordinary. Who would have seen this coming? And then right at the death, Muller just started to run out of energy. Literally, I reckon 20 metres before the line. And Cassidy got him to get that final podium. So on one level, I mean, if you see the footage of Thomas Biermeier and Fred Espinoz and Mark Schneider and the guys in the Abt pit, it's absolutely electric. They're just willing Muller to get to the line, and then at the last minute, Thomas Biermeier, I nearly said Thomas Beermonster then, Thomas Biermeier, he puts his head in his hands and realises that he's just missed out on a podium. But look, still, 4th position for Nico Muller, who has been one of the most impressive drivers this season, without doubt, gets a 4th position, and that is like a victory for those guys. It's just a superb performance.
Another minnow team that had an amazing weekend, you sort of alluded to it in our chat with Max earlier, ERT. For a team that's really struggled, both in terms of out-and-out pace, but also particularly in terms of energy management, they were really smart, and they got their just rewards for that, which is really nice to see. A great little team tactics. I'm assuming that was all planned, or rather than them making it up on the spot.
Yeah, they adapted their strategy. They realised early on that they could do an ultra saving mission and use each other as a sort of drafting tool, and just back off. And then with the concertina effect, the accordion effect into some of the corners, just lift and coast and cruise up to the field and stay out of trouble. That's exactly what they did, and they ended up with a 4th place after the penalty of Da Costa. Dan Ticktum got his best result in Formula E since he started at the beginning of last season. So, the season before, wasn't it? This is his 3rd season. So he did a really good job. Actually, both of them did. Sergio Sette Camera as well. I think he finished on the road.
Well, they needed to work as a team, didn't they, to make that possible?
Yeah, they did. And as Dan said when we spoke to him, he couldn't believe that other teams didn't adapt that strategy. I mean, they certainly were wiser to it on Sunday, but Da Costa and Sette Camera maximised everything. Sadly for Sette Camera, he got pinged for a power sort of overuse penalty.
Oh, is that what it was?
And he sort of slipped out the points. But Dan Ticktum to get a 4th, and then Sergio Sette Camera to get more big points on Sunday after really good qualifying, and also a fine run to what I think was 6th position on Sunday, and they ended up with 20 points. From a weekend, which
is a massive haul for that team,
huge,
isn't it?
Absolutely huge for them. And I think, to put into perspective, you touched on it a bit about what they've got at their disposal. Resources wise, they are very much the poor relation, but they seem to make up for it with a lot of these cute strategies, and they've hauled themselves up into, I think they're ninth, but
they're ninth in the points. 23 points they've got.
Yeah.
So they're a handful ahead of Apt, and obviously a million miles ahead of Mahindra. That might be the only mention they get on this podcast, frankly, because there's nothing much to say about them.
No, but I think that battle for the last three positions is very much between those teams: ERT, Apt, Cupra, and Mahindra. And at the moment, ERT are they're 4 points ahead of Apt Cooper, and that's who they're racing essentially for the in the points table. So fair play to them. Great effort. Really good to see.
On the flip side of that, reigning teams champions, one of the pre-season favourites, Envision, no points again. There was a meagre haul in Tokyo. What's going on there?
Well, they've got 4 points from the last 4 races, which is critical, isn't it? I mean, that's a crisis. And
you don't defend your championship like that.
Well, no, and they have now no hope of defending their team's title. Sadly, they're 90 odd points behind. I think Jaguar.
It's not even worth mentioning.
Their powertrain mothership. They're way off, and they just got both Buemi and Frines,
87 points.
Yeah, both Buemi and Frines just got involved in incidents. They were right in the midfield mire. Buemi was actually led a bit of the first race, but then again, who didn't? Buemi was quick on occasion, but just got involved in an accident on Sunday. Ditto Robin Frines, who got turfed off by Mortara in a real sort of messy.
He was very unlucky there, and I understood why he was very frustrated by that. What could he have done?
Robin, I spoke to Robin afterwards. He was very depressed, very raging, really. He just doesn't like, both he and Buemi just don't really, they don't like racing like that. None of them really do, but you've got to roll your sleeves up and you've got to try and deal with it. But if it's a random...
It is what it is, right?
If it's a random thing and you're just getting smashed to bits from behind and from the side, it's just the look of the draw, what you break, isn't it? Sometimes. So it was nothing more than that. Robin was really good in qualifying on Sunday and was in a reasonable position, then dropped back and got involved in the melee. So it's not as if the pace isn't there and the package isn't there. I'm pretty sure that they will return to form in Monaco. They won there last year with Cassidy, and Frines is mega round Monaco. Ditto Buemi. Yeah. I expect them to be fighting in the top 6 at the very least in Monaco, and return to form. Because one thing you say about Envision is they very rarely have a succession of bad races. They may have one, but I can't recall the last time they had 3 bad races on the trot. It's very unusual.
Before we move on to any other business, probably just worth dropping Jev and DS Penske's name in there, sort of there or thereabouts, but not quite fast enough, which I guess is a sort of story of their season. And what a Stoffel Van Dorn's having a proper stinker, isn't he?
Yep. It's much the same as last year, but seemingly without much light at the end of the tunnel for Stoffel. Same thing, quick on occasion, but fighting a car that's just not really there for him. And Jev is doing better with it, but not by much. Vergne was right there in both qualifyings and was always there or thereabouts in the race, but just never got into contention to strike out for a victory. And I spoke to Jev, and he just did not like this type of race, and it doesn't suit him. It's not for him. He's very much a purist when it comes to the way that he does his craft. I think Van Dorn's pretty much the same, but they'd never really had a chance to get into the podium positions. Vergne was penalised 5 seconds, don't forget, and should really by rights have had a podium on Saturday, but had an altercation with Nick Cassidy. Nick was highly unimpressed with Jev's lack of giving him room on the exit of the chicane, and the two hit each other, and Nick lost his front wing. Nick, both publicly on the radio and privately offline, was highly unimpressed with Jev.
Right.
On that one, but that was one of probably a dozen similar, high adrenaline, opinion thrashing out discussions that people were having in the media pen on both days, really.
Final bit we ought to mention: Jahan Daruvala got his first Formula E points, picking up 9th in the second race. So a fair play to him. It's not as we know, it's a very hard championship to come in as a rookie, but he's sort of upping his pace and getting closer to where he needs to be now.
Yeah, he did a decent job. He had a really strong Riyadh, didn't he? And then it sort of fell away for him in Sao Paulo and Tokyo. Didn't really make an impression. Saturday was difficult for him. Had plenty of contact, and then Sunday had a really decent race. Got his elbows out, got into position, finished in 10th, which became 9th after Hughes's not Hughes. I can't remember now. So many bloody penalties going around. I can't remember, but he went up into 9th place. It was Gunther, wasn't it? We should know that, as he was our guest on the podcast.
Guest from earlier, yeah.
So he benefited from that, and yeah, good to see. I think that'll be a good confidence boost to him as he goes to the home race for Maserati MSG at Monaco. But still, yeah, I think he probably needs at least a few more races to then get into any contention for more points scoring performances.
All good. Right, well, let's look ahead. So it's a bit of smattering of good and bad in any other business. So let's start with the bad, or the inevitable. No fast charging for this season. I mean, this has... has it gone beyond farcical status now? It's certainly bloody close. I mean, honestly, what the hell?
Well, I spoke to Marek Naravecki at the FIA, who's the most senior FIA delegate at Misano, and asked him the question, and he didn't officially say that it wouldn't be seen this season. Lots of talk about the new innovation and a lot of work that's going on with the supplier, which is WAE, or Fortescue WAE, as we should call them now. And it needs to be reliable, and it needs to be just completely bulletproof, really, which it's obviously not at the moment. And the wait has gone on for a long time now. And I think, I asked the CEO of Formula E, Jeff Dodds, about 2 months ago if it was.
Did you speak to Jeff?
I did speak to Jeff. It's becoming a trend now, isn't it? And
I'm going to have to mention it every time you drop it in now.
I just call him the gaffer. I spoke to the gaffer, and he said that I put it to him that, was this now an embarrassment? And he didn't go that far, but I think in terms of what the teams are thinking and what some of the stakeholders are thinking, this is not highly unlikely.
I don't see how you can do it now.
No.
Half the midway point in the season, you introduce some new technology that might fail on one of the championship contenders' cars. You can't do that. That's just not. It's not fair.
No, it's not, and it just makes all kinds of sense to bring this in if they are going to bring it in at all, which I think is still their motivation too. They won't bring it in until next season when the Gen 3 Evo comes into play, which segues nicely.
So what do you know? Gen 3 Evo, what do you know?
Well, it was actually seen for the first time. I saw it in action last week. Ooh. Not allowed to display any images or even really describe what it is. I mean, obviously it's an evolution of the Gen 3 car.
Is it a car?
It is a car. It's very much a car. It's got 4 wheels. It's got it's got bodywork, and it's got a halo. And I mean, the front looks much different. It's a much different front wing, front bodywork section.
Are you optimistic?
I am only optimistic because the drivers are optimistic. And I spoke to Vergne in Sao Paulo, who's driven a version of it in terms of the active front powertrain and the different spec tyres. And if Jean-Eric Vergne is more enthused about something than the original Gen 3 car,
it's got to be good.
That's the litmus test, because I don't think there was a driver who was less enthused by the Gen 3 car last season. So I am actually hopeful that this is going to improve lap times, which isn't fundamentally necessary, but just be a more dynamic, more sort of punchy car, which it doesn't have rock hard tyres, and actually does deliver some of the possibilities and some of the good stuff that we like, and just make it a bit quicker. And let's hope that the attack mode actually does what it says on the tin next season, and we can actually get the attack mode back into a positive part of a meaningful part of the races, because it pretty much isn't anymore.
Yeah, let's hope so. In completely shocking news, despite having about 60 personnel hanging around at the app garage in Tokyo, the Lola Yamaha app deal has been made public.
Yeah, it was funny that, isn't it? Who were we chatting with? We were chatting with Dario, weren't we? Dario and was it Lotterer turned up? We were having a chat, and we all looked at each other and went, "Yeah, I think we got a story here." That's like, well, all these becoated Yamaha engineers with Mark Preston and Thomas Bittermeyer. It was an open secret that that's the way that Apt were going to go. So it'll be, as far as we know, it'll be Apt, Cupra, Lola, Yamaha. So a bit of a mouthful. Although I'm told
they're going to have to come up with a shorter version of that.
I think the Cupra part, not there isn't a deal done yet. I think that's under discussion how Apt and Cupra, if they coexist still next season. But let's wait and see on that. But I spoke to Mark Preston. Mark was in Misano as well, and they're targeting early June to get a proper test done for their development car, of which Apt and Yamaha personnel will be at. So lots to look forward to with Lola Yamaha returning, both of them big names in the sport, and Apt to have a sealed future now after the Mahindra years, which were very challenging for them.
They're a good team, Apt.
Good.
With that powertrain, which is a dog. They're doing minor miracles, I think. And if the Lola Yamaha is anywhere near half decent, they will make the most of it.
I think so. Could be a surprise package. I think it'll take some time to get up to speed, but they're coming in. Okay, it's not a new rule set, but it is an evolution of that rule set. And I think there's a lot for them to look forward to. I spoke to Thomas and a few Apt personnel last weekend, and I said, look, I really know Till Bechtelsheimer very well, the now new owner of Lola, and obviously I know Mark well and Keith Smout and people like that in the team, and they have got a fantastic track record. They are the only team to win back-to-back titles, remember? So no, that's not true, is it? Because Mercedes EQ did it, but they were the first to do back-to-back titles.
Correct.
In season 4 and 5.
Well done for correcting yourself while I'm there nodding along.
Yeah, I got a big snap of oversteer there, but just saved the tank slapper from going into the wall. But no, I think they'll be pretty potent next year, that whole collection of companies there.
So tank slappers, obviously a common thing on motorbikes. Misano, a bike track. Was that a one-off or a two-off for Formula E? Is that the future of FE in Italy? What's going on with that?
Well, I spoke to Jeff Dodds about this on Sunday morning. Had a quick coffee, and they're going to review what occurred at Misano. I mean, very quickly, my summary appraisal of it is that it's such a charming place. It's a lovely place to go. But
fabulous place.
I think they were lucky if they got 5,000 people there on any given day.
It was League 2 crowd, wasn't it?
It was, it wasn't far off. I think it's quite early in the season. It's pretty quiet around this Adriatic region. I think if they had it in sort of May or June or July, you get a much bigger crowd. But look, they've always struggled to get crowds there. DTM
Nothing gets
race,
crowds there except for bikes.
Yeah, I mean, a DTM event wouldn't have got much more. It's just... I think there's a real crossroads with Italy. Do they pursue this, and obviously it's financially more viable, or do they go back to a city centre? I think Rome is unlikely. Sadly, that great track I think is probably lost.
But get the Cagliari street race back again.
Yeah, give Paolo and the Wolf a call.
That was wide.
That needs some
wide.
context. Without running into 4 hours of podcast, that needs some context, and I'll leave you to that.
There was a Formula 3000 street race on the streets of Cagliari in the fabulous island of Sicily. It's Sicily, isn't it? It's not Sardinia.
No, Cagliari is Sardinia. Yeah.
Sardinia. So scratch that. I think it ran twice. They ran twice or maybe a third time. I can't remember. Anyway, they've run street races there. Do it.
Well,
that's a quick summary.
I'm told that they are looking at somewhere in and around the Modena area. I think is some discussions that have been happening, but I don't think we're certainly not going to know until June, which is when the first draft of the 2024-25 calendar will take place. But we anticipate that will start this calendar year, probably in Sao Paulo in December.
Good stuff. We've got another podcast coming up after Monaco. You'll never guess who the guest is.
Is it Jeff Dodds?
It is. It's Formula E CEO, Sam's best mate, Jeff Dodds.
Yeah.
So, be sure to tune into that for all sorts of sound bites and bonhomie and other fun and exciting things. And obviously check the race, the -race.com for all of Sam's Formula E musings between now and then. And don't forget to check out all our other fabulous podcasts, including And Colossally That's History, amazing look back at some of the key moments of motorsport history. We're on episode 3, maybe 4 by the time this comes out. So far, Richard Williams and Matt Bishop have looked back at what happened in and around the creation of the Brawn team. They've rated the top 5 Brits at Ferrari on the back of the Lewis Hamilton, Ollie Behrman stuff going on there. And they've examined the ways in which Michael Schumacher transformed motor racing. It's all really good stuff. And if you like the history of motorsport, you'll like that. I'm not sure if they're going to do a Cagliari Euro 3000 street race one. Maybe I can be a special guest on that if they do.
That's our job, isn't it?
That is our job. And on that random tangent note, goodbye.
The Athletic.